interview is part of the History Heard project. The content of this interview may be used for historical research. However, no part of this video itself may be reproduced without the express written permission of an authorized representative of History Heard or Frank Schaal. Today is January 10th, 2010 at 2 p.m. This is an interview with Frank Schaal in Sarasota, Florida. He was born on October 5th, 1921 in Breslau, Germany.
This mechanic then later on, after Kristallnacht, when they destroyed all the Jewish stores, no Jew was allowed to own any store anymore. No Jew really was allowed to work except for each other. So the way people were working was by a committee that was still in existence. The Nazis still allowed a organization to exist in order to arrange people's immigration. Right after we left, they stopped. They stopped all immigration, and the war broke out. And then you couldn't leave anymore.
Did your family leave with you?
Pardon?
Was it, you said was it just you that left, or who left with you?
Your parents couldn't leave.
My parents were still in Germany when I left, and it was my job to get them out. But I failed in that job, which bothered me terribly. I had to leave my parents behind, and I was working on it. My boss, I worked in a factory. They put me into a factory in England, and this man promised me that he would get my parents out. He would apply for the papers and get a permit and all this kind of thing so that they could come to England. Also, it wasn't true. He just used that in order to make me work more hours, and he took advantage of me. But it all ended after I was 1 year in England because the English government interned us. And we were subsequently prisoners in England as enemy aliens, and then sent to Canada as war prisoners. And I spent 2 years in Canada behind barbed wire with as a war prisoners with machine guns and guards and soldiers with guns and so on and so forth in several
camps,
several
prisoner camps.
cities. One was in New Brunswick in Canada, in the middle of the woods, and we had to fell trees there, but this is all afterwards. So I was 2.5 years, I was interned and couldn't get my parents out. And then one day I received a postcard which was traveling a full year before it got to me. That my parents, it was a postcard from Moscow,
Russia.
that they had taken a train from Germany to Shanghai, China, by train. There were 4 weeks on the railroad, and they sent me a postcard from Moscow. And this is how I knew that my parents were alive. They spent the war years in Shanghai with under terrible conditions, but at least they were alive. And they, after the war, my brother was able to get them into Palestine, which later became Israel. In 1948, Israel became into existence, came into existence, and my parents went there in 1947. And we came to the United States in 1947, after I returned to England from my internment. And that is after the Holocaust, but we saw the Kristallnacht, and I went through school. I went 2 years after my grammar school, 4 years of grammar school, and then I went to a higher school for 2 years, And when Hitler came over, the whole thing changed. Jews weren't allowed, everybody had to greet the teachers with an outstretched arm and had to say Heil Hitler. Okay, that was the German.
Mhm.
You're familiar with
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Well, we have pictures of that
But
too.
the Jews weren't allowed to do that. But we weren't allowed to say hello or good morning or anything else either, because it was the rule that everybody had to say Heil Hitler. And when I met a teacher and I greeted him and I said good morning, and he stopped and I says, you're supposed to say Heil Hitler. So he says, I'm a Jew. He says, it doesn't matter, you say Heil Hitler. So I said Heil Hitler. And I was punished because I didn't do it. So the next time I said Heil Hitler, so the teacher stopped and says, you're a Jew, you're not allowed to say Heil Hitler. So I was punished for that.
Oh my goodness.
And then they had a new subject in school. It was subjected to, it was part of biology. Biology in our class at that time was split between zoology, which is animals, and biology, which was plants,
Mhm.
trees, and the rest of it. And under zoology, there was a subject called raciology, which means that the non-German, they called the Germans Aryans, because they thought they all derived from an Aryan race, which was way back in history was a people called Aryans who came from somewhere from the Asian, deep into Asia, and they migrated from there through India to India. Iran comes from Aryans. Iraq comes from Aryans, and they settled down in these, and some of them came to Germany, and they were a warlike people, and they conquered much of the world, and they settled in these places. So the Germans they called themselves Aryans.
They're supposed to be blonde and blue-eyed.
True. Yeah, they said they were blonde and blue eyes like you. Well,
Yeah.
okay, that was a typical German. I'll show you pictures
Yeah, we have
later
all
on.
pictures of that.
And and a Jew was supposed to be looking like me. So they pulled me in front of a class, and we were 55 boys. And the teacher explained what a Jew looks like and how they could recognize a Jew on the street. Because a Jew was not a citizen anymore. Hitler had a law, an order, gave an order that Jews lost their citizenship. So we had no rights anymore. We couldn't go to court and say, here's a guy who hit me because I'm a Jew. We weren't allowed to use the courts anymore. We were nothing. We were reduced to animals, and then later, not even that, later in the Holocaust, we were reduced to rats. And what do you do with a rat? You either shoot a rat or you poison a rat. And that is exactly what they did with the Jewish people during the Holocaust. They poisoned them or they shot them. This was our status during the Holocaust, rats.